Hello and welcome everyone to our TechnoState channel. And here we are today with our series Dialogue with BIM Experts. I'm so excited to bring in another incredible guest today. We are meeting today with Mr. Rohith Harish, who is a senior BIM project manager at TechnoState. He's joining us today to talk about his experience with BIM-based projects and his complete journey with TechnoState. If you're someone in the AEC industry, a student or a professional, an architect or an engineer, whoever it is, and who is so curious to know more about BIM concepts for construction and projects, and so curious to know more about the role of a BIM manager in a project, this is definitely the conversation you want to be listening to. Welcome, Mr. Rohit. I'm so
Thank
excited to
you.
have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gayatri.
Great. So we'll start with the first question. Like, what is
Mhm.
actually your inspiration to specialize in BIM?
Oh, okay. So inspiration, I will tell you my story, how it all began. So while I was in my fourth year of engineering, I was actually very curious about construction. Whenever a construction is happening in the neighborhood, or I was always very curious about that. But somehow I was in my mechanical engineering field. So I wanted to use that mechanical engineering into construction somewhere. Okay, so then in my fourth year, I came to know about BIM from one of my seniors. Okay, so I came to know that there is an MEP field and where, it is a construction sector where I can contribute as a mechanical engineer. So that was really a good eye opener for me. So then I started exploring, then I started learning BIM software like Revit, Naviswork, and all of that during my college days itself. In my fourth year, I started learning. And also I started interning. I started my first job, you can say, as a BIM intern while I was in my fourth year. So from there to here, it's all been BIM.
That's amazing. Because not lot many people, take internship in BIM during their engineering
Yeah,
architecture courses.
I also consider myself fortunate to do that right now when I'm looking back.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, at this stage, I would like to ask you, what is actually a career roadmap for a BIM manager would look like, and was it any different
Mhm.
for you?
Okay, so ideally for any anybody to become a BIM manager, right? It takes a lot of experience. It doesn't come up with just the titles. Okay, so it takes experience. First, you have to start your career. For example, in my case, I started as a BIM intern, and then when I got my next job after my college, I started working as a BIM engineer. Then after a year, I got promoted to a senior BIM engineer. Then after that, I came to a position where I understood that if I want to change upgrade myself and move ahead of the engineering roles, I understood that I wouldn't be able to do that in my previous organizations because it take a lot of time and it took a lot of time then. It was some time back also. So it was like I should wait for another 5 years or 6 years to get a lead role, and then again wait for another 5 to 6 years to become a manager. So it was very time consuming, and I was really worried about that. So I had to switch jobs. I started looking for opportunities. I gave a lot of interviews. So luckily, Technostruct found me, and I had an interview, very interesting interview. So where I was very clear about what I wanted to do and how I want to contribute in the organization. And then first, when I came here as a BIM coordinator, and then within a year, I promoted to become a BIM project manager. And right now, I'm a senior BIM project manager.
That's amazing. Congratulations on your career roadmap. And I'm sure this would answer a lot many people in the early stages who are wondering what the career roadmap for them would be. They start a career in BIM. So thank you for that. And this is something an interesting question for me to ask you, which is about what surprised you
Mhm,
the most about what you thought the role of a BIM manager would be, but what it
mhm.
actually turned out to be.
Okay. Surprise. When I look up, okay. So when I was working in my initial organization, in the first organization or the second one where I was working, so I had my BIM managers. I see them work. but you will not get a lot of clarity at that point of time. You will not know what they're exactly doing. You will be knowing that they are doing a lot of tasks, they are always in the office, they are busy, they are doing a lot of stuff, but you will be not very clear about what you're doing, what they are doing at that point of time. Slowly, you will understand a few things. You might not understand a lot of things that they are doing, and with time, with experience, you will learn. At that point of a time, in the initial phase of your career, you will not be able to predict what you will be doing as a BIM manager. It's very difficult to do that.
Yeah, exactly right. I totally understand your perspective, Standard, because people in early career always wonder what seniors would do and what their daily duties would be like. And only
Correct.
when they get promoted and they understand what about being in the shoes of a project manager. So
Yeah.
that's amazing where you touched upon. So we talked about BIM career and
Mhm.
what are the job duties and things like that. And now I'd like to ask you about what are the first steps of planning a BIM-based project?
Okay. First steps of planning a BIM-based project. Okay.
Yeah,
So, ideally, if a project is starting in BIM, this is the right process. So, if a project is starting in BIM, ideally a client will float an EIR document. EIR is called as Employer's Information Requirement, where the client will be basically specifying what their requirements are, what their technical requirements are, what their management requirements are. Basically, what is their BIM requirement in the project? They will be specifying it as in a document. But it is not likely that all the projects will have an EIR document. It's a document where you understand the requirement of your client. Okay. So it can be through a meeting. It can be a proper documented way like an EIR document, or it can be just a meeting where you note down points from the client. And after that, you create a BIM execution plan. Right, BIM execution plan is a detailed plan of how BIM is going to be executed in all the stages of a project. Okay, so how meetings will be happening, how frequently it will be happening, how the information exchanges will happen, where the models will be stored, what is the common data environment going to be, what are the file formats to be used. All this information will be fed in a BIM execution plan, and you will decide it with all the stakeholders. And then, this all this majorly happens before tender stage itself, and post tender also you update the existing BEP. Once all the tenders are fixed, you update the existing BEP. And after that, the first meeting that will happen in any BIM project is a BIM kickoff meeting. Okay, project kickoff meeting, where all the stakeholders will be present, and they will be discussing. There will be a kickoff presentation, which is a shorter derivation of a BIM execution plan only, where they will be discussing about how they want to implement BIM on this project with all the stakeholders. So that's how the project ideally starts.
that's great. So you mentioned about uh, how the initial stages of a BIM project
Mhm.
and the documents that come under the kind of presentation that is needed to meet all the stakeholders' requirements. So this completely answers, a lot many doubts or clarification that are needed for anyone thinking what would be the initial stages of a project would
Yeah,
look like. So thank you for mentioning that.
no
And
problem.
as we mentioned about the initial stages of a project, now
Mhm.
I would like to ask you this question: at what stage does a BIM manager come into picture of a construction project?
Okay, so it depends from project to project. It's very subjective of project. So maybe at times the project, it depends on the requirement of the project and requirement of the client, honestly. So at times the BIM requirement for a particular project starts from the construction stage. At times it starts very early from the pre-tender stage or from the planning stage itself. We need to use BIM. That is a requirement from the client. So it depends from project to project from where BIM is being implemented into project. So whenever a BIM is being implemented to a project, there will be definitely a BIM manager who will be managing it. So let's say for the previous example that I gave for a project, ideally a project will have EIR, BEP, all these documents, right? So ideally a BIM execution plan will be created from a contractor's perspective, general contractor's perspective, or a principal architect's perspective. where they will take input from all the subcontractors, all the other trade partners. And so ideally, a BIM manager or a BIM project manager will create the BIM execution plan for a project, create all the other documentations as well. There is a long list of documentations like MIDP, MPDT. So all these documentations will be created for a project. So if they are using BIM, let's say if they have started using BIM from the construction stage of a project and not so early, then also a BIM execution plan will be created. But so basically you divide the project based on and you create a plan of work. Okay, which means you will specify various stages of a project. Ideally, there will be a concept stage, schematic design stage, right? Develop design stage. So there will be different stages in a project: construction stage, handover stage, right? So on which stage you are implementing BIM, it is very subjective of project and depends on that BIM will be implemented.
Amazing, amazing. So, is there like any thumb rule to calculate the man hours required for a BIM project?
Okay, so this is very tricky actually. So people generally say that for a square feet area or for a area wise calculation, people generally do, but it's not really going to give you an efficient value when you're calculating the number of hours required for a certain job. According to me, I never do that. It depends on. So I will briefly explain you how I do it when a project comes to me for an estimation. So basically, you will divide the project based on various zones, buildings, levels. You will segregate the project, segregate the work basically based on levels, buildings, and all of it. And let's say if there is 10 levels in a project, okay? So for example, I'm just opening level one drawing or the ground floor drawing, whatever. Okay, for example, I'm opening up the architectural layout. So maybe in that level one itself, there might be 4 zones. Okay, so let's say I'm going to zone A. So I will imagine myself working for that particular area of zone A. Of course, I will consider how much area is in that zone and I will have a rough idea with in my mind. But apart from that, I will consider how complex is it. First of all, first parameter or the first thing that every estimator always considers is what is the LOD of the BIM project. To till what LOD you need to create the model. So that is very important actually for an LOD 300 model and an LOD 400 or 500 model. The amount of work is significantly very high. Okay, so that's the first factor that we will consider. And for a particular area, for example, for a zone A in level one, I will assume myself working on it. So for example, if I'm doing modeling, how much time is it going to actually take? I will have an understanding. I will calculate it based on how many days it will require for me to complete that particular area. Okay, so days, then I will segregate it into hours. Then I will, break it down into hours. So for a particular area for modeling, so estimation is based on the scope of work, right? What is your scope of work? What is your deliverable, right? So maybe your scope of work is only limited to modeling. Maybe it is going for BIM coordination as well. Maybe it is going for shop drawing creation as well. Maybe it is going for prefabrication also. So based on all this activity for a particular area, how much of time is required? How much days? If you are actually working, how much time? Then you break it down to the number of hours. So, and after that, you will get an idea. For once you do for a level, you will understand where this is going with terms of area, and you will have an idea. Once you finish a particular area with for all the disciplines, not only for one, for all the disciplines which you are involved in, if you do it for a particular area, you will have a fair understanding of how it will take, but you will have to do it for all the areas individually. Yep.
All right, that's amazing. This is going to be very resourceful for anyone here who's looking for like questions about how do they calculate number of hours, how they
Mm-hmm.
or use it for scheduling and things. So thank you for elaborating on this. And as you talked about the scheduling and stuff, now I'd
Mm-hmm.
like to ask you this next question where about structuring your team. How do you
Okay.
actually structure a team for your project? I know it's subject based or depending on the project, and describe the criteria for a hiring for such hiring team. I
Okay.
mean, this is two questions. in one question.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. So this is very related to the last question. So
Yeah.
for any project, we will do an estimation. We will have an idea, rough idea of how much time is it gonna actually take us for finishing up a task. And for any project, for any activity, there will be always a deadline. So number of resources not, the deadline is always not an issue. To be honest with you, to them the deadline is not really an issue. As it depends on how many resources you can put. If it's a 200-hour job, if you increase the number of resources, the deadline can be met. So based on that, based on the deadline and based on the amount of work you plan the resources, for example, we will consider contingency also. For example, if there is some issue with the model, if the model is not opening, if the Rivet is not responding, then we consider some contingency. We take that in mind, and for any fixed deadline, we calculate backward. So if let's say if, for the next Friday I have to submit something, I will try to make sure that everything is completed by Wednesday, so that we will be left with another 2 days for one more final round of QC. Okay, because that is very important before sending it out to somebody. So that will be so if I need to finish it off by Wednesday, so how many resources I will need for it? So how much work will be there? How much hours of work will be there? According to that, you segregate it with number of resources you required for a project.
Great, great. So you described about how do you operate for a project, like as manage
Uh-huh.
and schedule the project. So I would like to know if there are from your recent project, describe the
Uh-huh.
most successful construction project that you ever managed and directed, and how did you make that it's so successful?
See, success for a BIM project is it's again very subjective and very questionable. So for me, I will tell you what really success means. When I think that project was a success is when the client again comes back to you, and when they are ready to give business back to you once you have completed a project, or if they are directly referring you to some other client or somebody else saying that this team is good, they have done good work for us. You can take up their services. That is when I assume that the project that we have delivered is successful. If there is no other major roadblock in any project, if there is no other issues, if there is no major issues or clients comment, or if there is no major issues with any project, then most of the projects are successful. But you can consider it a really successful project when that client that you are representing is giving you more projects or is referring you to any other new client.
Amazing. Thanks for like you sharing this perspective. So we talked a lot about how do you frame your team and what how do you schedule and things like that. So now I also want to talk about how do you actually QC your work?
Okay, QCing a team's work. Okay, so there is a QC process, defined QC process for any project based on the deliverable. Okay, for at times it can be a shop drawing, at times it can be prefabrication drawings, at time it can be quantification. At times it can be a rendered image. At times it can be a video walkthrough. Okay, it depends on what is the deliverable. At times it can be a coordination project where you do BIM coordination. So the QC method varies from project. What is the deliverable? Let's say, so ideally what will happen is there will be an engineering team, uh, okay, who will be doing the modeling work, who will be taking up the design drawings, doing the modeling, finishing up the modeling. First step, what they will do is, for example, they will do a quick self QC. Okay, once their task is completed, everybody in our office is required to do a self QC of their work, what they have done, and then they will give it to their respective leads for their discipline. For example, we have leads for all the disciplines for architecture, structure, mechanical, electrical. They have respective leads, team leads. So they will be giving out their the days and work to their respective leads for QCing. They will do a quick QC of their work, and they will have some comments. They will mark up those comments in PDF, and they will send it back to their engineers to update it. They will update it, they will come back again, and they will again make sure all the comments are picked. And finally, at times it comes back to me. for a check-in for one round of final glance. I will do that at the end before sending it to the client. I will have a quick round of a quick glance of what is going to be sent. And so basically there will be dedicated checkers also for a different type of a project. For example, for a steel project, we will have dedicated checkers. For example, steel jobs are usually big, very big, and there is a lot of checking involved. Okay, the amount of time you have invested for modeling and checking will be almost be equivalent for a steel project. So there will be dedicated checkers for that who will be highly experienced, who might have done modeling in their career, who might have done all of this, and now they have become checkers. Okay, so for such projects, we will have dedicated checkers who will be who their complete job throughout their day is to do checking. There will be first checking, second checking, and then cross checking will happen if the comments are picked, and then one final QC will happen. So there will be 3 to 4 levels of checking happening before we submit something to the client.
Amazing. So, what actually happens in a coordination meeting?
In a coordination meeting, ideally, all the stakeholders will be present, architects, structural engineers, all the stakeholders will be present in a meeting, and then there will be a BIM consultant. They might be ideally be representing a GC, or if the GC have an in-house BIM team, they will be running the coordination meetings, or else if they hire a BIM consultant for them, they will be running the coordination meeting. So what will happen is before the coordination meeting, I'll just give you an idea. For example, coordination meeting happens weekly. For example, we fix a date and time for a recurring meeting. For example, let's say coordination meetings happen on every Wednesday. At a certain time, coordination meeting happens, right? So before that, before 1 day before that, for example, by Monday end of the day, all the stakeholders are required to upload their latest models, coordination models, to the cloud server, whatever the common data environment is. It can be Econex, it can be share file, it can be BIM 360 glue, whatever the CDE is. All stakeholders are required to upload it. And then this BIM consulting firm, which is running the coordination meeting, they will take up all the latest models from all the stakeholders. They will run a clash detection. They might use a coordination issue software like tracking software like BIM track or Rivis to whatever the software is. They will prioritize the issues based on critical issues, high level issues, medium level issues, tier 1 issues, tier 2 issues, however they are prioritizing those issues. They will prioritize those issues and critical issues, okay, which are created before the coordination meeting. Critical issues where it requires the help of multiple stakeholders. Right. For example, to resolve that issue, you also don't know how you're going to actually do it. You need designers' help on that. So you basically need help from multiple stakeholders to resolve that particular issue. So such critical issues will be discussed in a coordination meeting. Coordination meeting usually runs for a duration of 1 hour to 2 hours, depending upon the complexity of the project. So basically, you will be discussing all the critical issues, and you will be having you will be flying around the model to see other issues. If you will just make sure you will just go through room by room or area by area. You'll fly around the model and see if everything is right on place. And you also see what are the pending issues from all the stakeholders. You can create dashboards, you can create different types of reports from which you can clearly see how many issues are pending with each stakeholder. This is what ideally happens in a coordination
Great.
meeting.
Amazing. Thanks for elaborating on what the coordination meeting should look like and the
Mhm.
actions that have been held at those meetings. So we'll talk a lot about these technologies, and it
Mhm.
keeps evolving, right?
Yeah.
So the latest one maybe go by the tomorrow's latest one. So what
Mhm.
are the? I want you to expand a bit about the latest technology, which is about scan to BIM, which is actually not latest, but it has been widely used at worldwide now.
Mhm. So scan to BIM has been is majorly used for different activities now. Okay. Initially, it was used only as a tool where you capture the site reality and you use it to
Mhm.
convert it to a BIM model, right? So nowadays, even laser scanning is used as a QC process. Okay, for many of my projects, laser scanning is used as a QC process. For example, if it's an LOD 500 project where it is going till as-built modeling. Okay, so this laser scanning, so what you do is you create a model, right? You create a complete model and you issue shop drawings to site for execution. And they have followed your shop drawing, or on site they have followed your shop drawing and they have executed it. But still on site, they might make some changes. They might make some variations based on site requirement. They might do it, right? So when you're creating an as-built model, you want to make sure whatever is there on site is captured back to the model. So in those instances also, you use that. You make sure that what is in the model and what is there on site matches. You use laser scanning for that. It is also used as one level of QC method these days. Apart from that, laser scanning is used for conventional construction also. For example, for any old monument or any old building, if you want, where you don't have initial site layouts or floor plans of it, you use laser scanning. It has been used for a lot of monuments these days. Laser scanning is used, and they're scanning the whole area, and they are creating BIM models out of it. And right now, these days, people are developing using artificial intelligence and machine learning to automate that. Actually, what we get as a scan data, they are trying to automate that to create an LOD 200 or 300 BIM model by the machine itself. So there is a lot of research and development happening in that area.
Very interesting, very interesting. So, I would like to hear from you what are the recent scanning tools that are available in the market and which are the most popular ones?
Scanning tools for laser scanning, there are different types of laser scanners available, like Faro. There are so many different types of laser scanners available. In terms of technology, I'm not sure if you have heard about this Trimble station, Trimble field points. So Trimble has this. It's not really a scanner. I can't tell it as a scanner, but I can explain it. For example, let's assume that there is a deck level, floor level. Okay. Let's say it's a second floor level. You have a floor. Okay. So this floor will have a lot of load, right? This particular floor will have a lot of load. And there will be many supports and many hangers that will be connected to the bottom end of this floor, right? So all this weight, which is coming from the bottom, uh, let's say that there is a lot of pipes, ducts, cable tray, many MEP services are going below this floor. So all of it will be hung to that floor, right? So the load on that floor, okay, is also dependent on how many services are running below it. Okay, it is also one factor. So we create point load drawings to measure what is the load of each support. For example, for any particular trade, we create a point load drawing. There will be MEP services. For example, there is a plumbing line going on. There are different types of hangers attached to the slab. So we calculate on the number of type of supports used. And with that, we calculate the number of load imparted on that particular floor. Okay, so what we do is on site to automate this. So ideally in a construction project, okay, we place the supports first and then we place the services. Right, we cannot directly keep a pipe anywhere. You need a support first, then only you will be able to place a pipe. So you will first step is you will place a support. So how do you actually locate that pipe? How do you know the location of that support? It depends on the support location, right? So how do you know the exact location of where you need to bolt that support? You will measure it from the drawing. You will have a measurement from the center of pipe to a grid line or to a wall. You might have that, and you use a measurement and you will do it. You basically these days what we are doing is we are trying to automate that using Trimble workstation. So for all the support points or all the load points, okay, wherever there is a penetration or wherever there is a impact on the floor, okay, this can be used for pipe penetrating the floors also. Wherever there is an impact on the floor level, what we do is we create those points. Wherever those points are getting in contact with the floor, we create some Trimble points in a 3D model. Okay, and we convert that into a model, into a different set of a model where this Trimble workstation can read. Okay, and this Trimble workstation, what it does is it basically goes to the site and it will shoot those points on site automatically. It will shoot points based on the color codes, and whatever you give, it shoots point directly. So you can use that as a reference. You will be basically, when you're on site and when you're looking up on the floor level, basically you will see those points there. So it is easy for installation of all the MEPF services.
Amazing. Thank you for expanding on this very new topic, and I appreciate you expanding on topics that are under trend and people are not many aware, and many academic people are not
Yeah.
teaching these to the students at the stage where they should be also aware of. So we talked a lot about technology. We talked a lot about the technical aspects of a BIM-based project. And my last question here for you is about a myth, which is about BIM is only for large projects. What's your take on debunking this myth?
So that is a very big myth that BIM is used only for a large project. So if BIM can be beneficial for a large project, it can be definitely be beneficial for a smaller project also, right? So uh, the major difference is for a large scale project, for example, like an airport or a metro or a project like that, BIM might be used to a greater extent, to a greater LOD. Maybe BIM might be they might be using facility management and asset management. They might be using it for after construction, post construction maintenance. They might be using it for a large scale project. But for a small project, you might be using it to a lower extent. You might be creating the model. You might be creating drawings. You might be extracting quantities. You might be creating 4D simulation at the most. So it is not limited to the size of the project how BIM can be beneficial. If BIM can be beneficial for a large project, definitely it will be beneficial for a small project. However, said that there will be an initial setup cost for any whenever you are deploying BIM in any project, there will be an initial setup cost. You need BIM software, you need BIM licenses, you need BIM trained resources to do that. There is an initial setup cost, but if you look at the long run of it, and if you have certain objectives that you need to cover, if you have to reduce, if you have to create a sustainable building, or if you have to reduce wastage in construction, if you have certain objectives, then you will definitely use BIM. And in many countries around the world, BIM is used widely for small projects also. It is not only used for large scale projects. For example, in Europe, okay, in all the countries under European Union, it is mandate that all the public sector buildings should be mandatorily be constructed using BIM. And these public sector buildings are not really very big or large projects. They are like townhouses, public communion halls. All of these are very small projects compared to a big project like an airport or a metro. So all these projects in Europe, every single one of them is mandatorily constructed using BIM. So it is a very common myth that BIM is used only for a large project and it is not beneficial. Of course, it is beneficial. It might not be used to the same extent of how a large scale project is being used, but definitely it is beneficial for a small project as well.
Thank you so much for expanding on this topic because a lot many people are afraid to bring their small scope of a project to a BIM consultant because of
Mhm.
these myths. So
Yeah.
amazing, and thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your time. Your
No.
insights are incredible, and it's going to be very resourceful for young students as well as professionals in the industry. I'm really walking away with a lot of understanding about what a BIM manager can do in every stages of a project, starting from uh, making up a BEP and making up a QZ plan, and every stages of a project. Thank you for being here, Mr. Rohit.
No problem. No problem. Pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
And thank you everyone for watching. We are here today speaking with Mr. Rohit, the Senior BIM Manager, and we will see you with our next dialogue with BIM experts. Thank you.